Hi, Buck. Welcome to our weekly update. We always look forward for these opportunities that we can provide some valuable facets to our members and to the industry. And I think the topic that you and I talked about is the importance of fintech scaling up. And certainly there are some challenges associated with that. You know, as a founder, many founders are concerned with so many different aspects of their business, from the marketing, from running the financials, from investments, all these things they have to deal with. But one of the things that cannot be overlooked is scaling, because this scaling up the fintech is going to be important because that ties into the sustainability of the fintech, and overcoming some of the challenges that they need in order to scale could really determine if that fintech is going to survive or not. So, Buck, what are some of the things that you are seeing with regards to fintechs and their ability to scale? What are your thoughts?
Thank you, Wayne. First of all, this is a great topic, and almost every startup that I work with, this issue is something that we have to address at some point, and sooner the better. That's the first thing I'll say. And this topic is so close to my heart that if I don't stop by midnight, then please stop me. Okay. Yeah, but scalability, really critical because most startups are starting bootstrapping, and obviously they want to keep everything at the smallest possible scale, expense wise, infrastructure wise, people wise. And what happens is in this process, they use a lot of different things that do the job quickly. And it is probably, if they're lucky, they can get some small customers that they can actually service with that very, very small infrastructure, open source tools, or any other things that they may have selected. But the moment they hit a big customer, they start feeling the pinch, because if their infrastructure cannot scale in time, then essentially things don't. I mean, when you and me have worked on some customers, you remember, where the typical transaction volume of a customer was 200, 300 transactions in a month. And then you brought a customer to that startup, which was suddenly talking about 5 million transactions a year. And you know what happened, right? And there was so much scrambling because the servers couldn't take that, and just buying more and more servers is not the solution. All kinds of things. So we had to then do a lot of running around, quickly help them migrate to cloud and all those things that you have to do. But if you are not planned for them, it becomes terribly expensive, terribly time consuming. And in fact, it can bring your business down when you get your first big customer. So when you get your first big customer, instead of opening the champagne, you might be spending your nights in the data center trying to fix this or that. And if you want to
so,
avoid
so, so it's a good point that you've mentioned. So given that, again, and many CEOs are concerned with so many different things, or they may be surprised when those larger opportunities, those larger clients opportunities can come. So what are some of the things that you recommend that a CEO or a fintech thinks about so that they can be prepared for when it's time so they can scale more efficiently?
So first of all, I will go one step back and try to define what is scaling. Because many times people think of scaling as a technical issue.
Mhm.
Let me go to the cloud, or let me do this, let me do that, and all that stuff. But scaling, really speaking, is more about the organization as a whole rather than just the technology piece of that. If you can't scale in terms of your functionality, if you can't scale in terms of your own thinking as the CEO and founder, which is probably the most crucial, and in terms of yourself, like today, when, for example, let me take a very simple example. Let us say you have to offer support to your customers, right? And typically you have got a ratio that one support person can handle 40 queries a day, for example. So if you go on linearly, that okay, from 40, if I go to 80, I need two support people, and if I go to 400, I need 10, and if I go to 4,000, I need 100. You can easily see that business is not going to work because the cost of operations is going to become way too high. So while you are doing the support function, are you constantly looking at automating part of your support function using the latest tools like machine learning and all that, so that instead of 40 queries a day, a support person will handle 80 or 100 or 200? If you don't do that, then just adding more and more bodies is not going to run your business. So scaling is a lot more than just technology. It's about thinking, it's about functionality that you want to provide to your customers, and how are your people scaling in their mind. Then comes the technology piece. And in today's times, it's very easy because most of the time you start on the cloud and do it properly, and you'll be able to scale a lot. But I'll address one more point later on. I don't want to, kind of cram too many things here. But scaling is also about being able to scale down. That, unfortunately, most people don't consider. So when business is good, you are able to scale up. But when the business is not so good, are you able to scale down and cut down your costs?
Hmm. So it really goes back to the question, Buck, how can this be done? So, our audience and members are fintech founders, CEOs, and some may not necessarily have figured out the whole aspect on scaling. So what advice, in a very tactical, specific way, could you provide to our members when it comes to scaling efficiently and effectively?
Mhm. The technology piece, like I said, scaling has become a lot easier now as compared to 10 years ago when you used to do stuff in data centers. But let me take a very simple example, Wayne, so that if you have got, you know, uh, our members who are not necessarily technical people, but great entrepreneurs, I would like to know that I reach to all of them as well. So it's like, building a new house. You may build just a single story or a two-story home for yourself. But if your vision is that eventually it will be 20-story, then you have to build the foundation for 20-story load. Then you can take 10 more years to build those 20 stories. That's your choice. But if your foundation can take only 1 or 2 stories, then later on, there is no way you're going to put a 20-story building on top of that without dismantling everything and starting all over again. Does that make sense?
It absolutely makes sense, and it's something that many of the fintech founders and CEOs that I work with don't necessarily have that long-term vision, because they run their business maybe for 6 month increments, maybe a year, 2 years, 3 years, but looking forward and how their business will grow is a whole nother process. And so that's a whole nother concern that many fintech CEOs may not necessarily think about. So I can really see the challenge associated with scaling and the viability of the fintech. So
Mhm.
how do we get them thinking along those lines?
Exactly. And it's not just, transaction volume and stuff like that, but your exit paths. Tomorrow, some big guy may be interested in acquiring you. But if he feels that he will have to take down everything that you have written and rewrite it completely for scale to his expectation level, then it becomes a very hard thing for the person to pay you, or that becomes a discount in your valuation.
Yeah,
You don't want to
interesting.
pay it. Hmm.
Yeah. So, Buck, what do you think, in summary, what do you think a fintech needs to really consider when it comes to scaling?
Yeah, scaling. First of all, everything like we keep talking about all the time goes back to who your customer is. So if your customer is a credit union and credit union alone, then you need to think of scaling in a different way. But if your vision is to have Bank of America and Citibank and US Bank as your customers, then you have to think in a different way. So it all begins with customer all the time. Who is your customer? Then you have to look at your options. Like I said, first of all, you must think about scaling up and scaling down. Both you must be able to do to keep in pace with the time or the economic situation. And then there is another interesting thing that people need to see is scaling up and down versus scaling out and in. Grow your ecosystem to do some of your functions rather than you trying to do everything yourself. That makes a big difference to your cost structure, your efficiency, and specialization. At the end of the day, if you are a fintech and you have to offer, let us say, the normal example that we face for fintechs all the time, the biggest challenge that they face, AML KYC, when you're onboarding a new customer. Now, I keep telling every fintech that I work with that please don't try to build your AML KYC engines. Work with somebody because it's a whole different animal. You don't have any skill set in that. And keeping up with the regulations, keeping up with the changes, keeping with the OFAC list, it's a full job in itself. So that is scaling out. So you can scale out, use services, you can scale in when you don't need too much of that. So that gives a big advantage. And finally comes the technology piece as to what are you choosing. One simple example, when I give all the time, let us say a startup is planning to use a CRM, right? When he reaches customer and prospects and that kind of stuff. So let us say there is one CRM system in the market today, and which has got a free version, a very entry level version which is at no cost. Then you want some more features, you start paying a little bit, some more features, start paying more, some more features, start, which is a typical pricing style for most software SaaS distributors. But there is another one who goes in a different way. He says that, look, I'm not going to give you small limited functionality when you are free. I will give you everything that I have absolutely free, but only for 5 users. When you go beyond 5 users, you have to pay me something. When you go beyond 10 users, you have to pay me something. You see the difference between the approach?
Yeah. Different
And
approach completely.
Yeah, and that's exactly what the fintech entrepreneur needs to know. How does he want to offer his product, her product?
Right.
That will tell them what kind of scaling they need.
Yeah, no, it's good. Buck, I enjoyed this conversation about scaling and what fintechs need to think about. And I think that these timely discussions also help our members understand various ways in which they can incorporate some of these key aspects in their business. They can pick and choose. But the nice aspect is that we are providing information to our members that's relevant and that hopefully can resonate with some of the things that they need to think about as a fintech and a founder.
Absolutely. Because we want them to be sustainable. That's the most important goal.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much. I'm glad that we were able to share this information with our group today.
Here. Thanks, Wayne. Everyone.